This agent knows your release process, but it cannot open the live issue tracker. This one can read every issue and trigger every action, but it has no idea which checks your team requires. One has a skill, one has MCP, neither is complete. That is the distinction most comparisons miss. MCP and agent skills are not two versions of the same plugin system. They enter the agent loop on different rails. MCP supplies reach, live tools, data, and actions behind a standard protocol. A skill supplies know-how, the procedure, judgment, references, and reusable workflow for doing a job well. In the next 9 minutes, we will trace both rails, prove what each contributes, and end with a decision rule you can use immediately. Start with the work order in the middle, release version 2.4. The user has stated a goal, but a goal is not a workflow. The agent still needs to decide what information matters, what order to do things in, which actions are safe, and what counts as finished. Now load a release check skill. In systems such as Codex and Cloud Code, a skill is a folder organized around a required SKILL.md file. Its metadata says when the skill applies. Its body explains the workflow. The folder can also contain scripts, reference material, and templates. The useful trick is progressive disclosure. The agent does not need every page of every installed skill in its prompt all the time. Codex, for example, begins with compact metadata, a name, description, and file path. When the task matches, it reads the full instructions. Only then does it open the supporting references or run a bundled script if the procedure requires them. Watch what changes inside the workbench. The work order is still the same. No new external system has appeared. What changes is the route the agent can reason about. First, verify that the milestone is complete. Next, check unresolved blocking issues. Then run the release test suite. Finally, draft notes from merge changes and stop before publishing, unless approval is explicit. That is real capability in the everyday sense, but it is not new access. A Markdown file cannot magically authenticate to GitHub. It cannot create a network permission. It cannot grant a database role. If the agent already has shell access and a command line client, the skill can teach it to use those. If not, the playbook reaches a locked gate. This is the first decision boundary. Use a skill when the valuable thing is a repeatable method. Coding standards, incident response, deployment checks, document creation, code review policy, and a house style are procedures. They benefit from examples, constraints, and deterministic scripts. They are often local, versioned with a project, and readable by humans. Now connect the other rail. MCP stands for Model Context Protocol. It defines messages between a host or client and a server that exposes capabilities. We will focus on tools and resources, although the protocol has other features. When an MCP connection starts, the client discovers what the server offers. For tools, the client sends tools/list. The server returns definitions with names, descriptions, and JSON schema inputs. A tool might be called github.listissues, with fields for owner, repository, labels, and state. When the model chooses that tool, the client sends tools/call with structured arguments. The server performs the operation and returns content or structured output. The result goes back into the agent loop as an observation. The model can inspect it, decide what to do next, call another tool, or answer the user. Resources use a related idea for context. A server can expose files, database schemas, or application-specific information through unique resource identifiers. The host decides how those resources enter the conversation. The important point is that the data can be live and owned by another system. Notice what MCP has changed. The workbench can now reach the issue tracker through a typed interface. Authentication, rate limits, and access control can be handled at the connection and server layers. The tool description tells the model what the operation does and what arguments it accepts. But a tool schema is not your release policy. It does not know that your team treats a Severity 1 issue as blocking. It does not know that release notes must exclude internal ticket titles. It does not know that production publishing requires a human approval. You can cram some of that into tool descriptions, but then every tool begins carrying pieces of a workflow, and the procedure becomes scattered across the capability layer. This is why the popular question, skills or MCP, creates a false contest. A well-shaped agent stack can use both. The skill gives the task a route. MCP supplies the live doors along that route. Let us prove the separation with a tiny deterministic inspection, instead of pretending one anecdotal agent run is a benchmark. On disk we have a release check skill. Its front matter names the workflow. Its instructions require 3 steps: read open blocking issues, run the local tests, and produce a draft report without publishing. Beside it is a tool manifest representing an MCP server. It exposes github.list issues with a JSON schema. That manifest provides a live capability shape, but it contains no release order and no team policy. Run node proof/inspect agent stack.mjs. The inspector reads both artifacts: procedure found, release check/skill.md, capability found, github.list issues. Decision: use both. Stack ready, know-how plus live access. Now remove the MCP manifest. The skill still describes an excellent process, but the inspector reports missing live capability. The agent might still use a shell or browser if those tools exist, but the skill itself did not create them. Restore MCP and remove the skill. The capability returns. The server can list issues exactly as promised, but the workbench no longer knows which labels block a release, what sequence to follow, or where approval is required. MCP did its job. The missing behavior belongs somewhere else. With both rails connected, the work order becomes executable. The skill asks for unresolved blockers. The agent selects the MCP tool. The server returns 1 severity 1 issue. The skill's decision rule marks the release blocked. The result is not just data and not just advice. It is a source decision with a visible evidence trail. This architecture also makes maintenance cleaner. If the GitHub API changes, you update the server or connector. The release policy can remain stable. If the team changes its approval rule, you update the skill. The server does not need to learn your entire operating manual. Capability changes and procedure changes have different owners and different release cycles. There is one more boundary, and it matters. Neither a skill nor MCP is automatically a security boundary. A skill contains operational instructions. Treat third-party skills like code and configuration from a supply chain. Read them, pin their source, understand the scripts they can execute and the tools they expect. A carefully written playbook can still request a dangerous action. An MCP server exposes real capabilities. The protocol specification recommends making tool exposure visible and keeping a human able to deny invocations. The host, the server, and the underlying system still need authentication, least privilege, confirmation for sensitive actions, input validation, logs, and safe defaults. A helpful tool description does not enforce authorization, and do not confuse selection with permission. An agent choosing a skill means the instructions are relevant. An agent choosing an MCP tool means the operation appears useful. Neither choice should silently override the user's authority or the source system's access controls. So here is the practical decision rule. If the value is stable, reusable know-how, start with a skill. If the agent needs live data or an action behind a typed interface, use MCP. If a repeatable workflow must operate across live systems, combine them. Put the procedure in the skill. Put access and execution in the server. Keep permissions and approvals explicit around both. Return to our work order. The blueprint tells the agent how your team releases software. The cable bus lets it read the tracker and invoke approved actions. The agent joins them inside one loop, and the work order leaves the bench with evidence attached. Access is not know-how. Know-how is not access. Once you give each one the right job, MCP and agent skills stop competing and start composing.